Nestled deep in the heart of a quiet mountain town, surrounded by towering pines and fresh mountain air, stood Sarah Thompson's cabin, a place she called her sanctuary. It wasn't just any ordinary retreat. It was a dream she had nurtured, for years, brick by brick, stone by stone. Every corner of the cabin told a story. Every window framed a breathtaking view, and every creaky floorboard held memories of laughter, peace, and solitude. For Sarah, this little piece of paradise wasn't just an escape from the noise of city life. It was her happy place, her refuge. The journey to building her dream cabin hadn't been easy. Decades ago, when Sarah first stumbled upon the land, during one of her weekend hikes, she knew instantly that it was special. The property was tucked away at the edge of a dense forest, far enough from the main roads to feel secluded but close enough to civilization to remain practical. What made the plot even more unique was its access point, a narrow, winding dirt road that snaked through the woods. This road wasn't just any path. It was the only way in or out of the cluster of cabins scattered throughout the area. Then no one thought much of it. The previous owner sold the land to Sarah with full rights to the road included, and she never imagined it would become such a crucial detail in her life. Sarah poured her heart and soul into designing the cabin. She wanted it to blend seamlessly with nature while still offering modern comforts. Over weekends and holidays, she worked tirelessly alongside local builders, choosing each beam, tile, and fixture herself. Slowly but surely, her vision came to life. A cozy wooden structure with large glass windows that let sunlight pour in during the day and offered stunning views of the starry sky at night. Outside, she planted wildflowers along the driveway and built a small wooden bench overlooking the valley below. It was perfect, exactly how she'd always imagined it. For years, Sarah lived peacefully in her cabin, enjoying the tranquility it offered. Her neighbors were friendly enough, though they mostly kept to themselves. Many of them owned vacation homes in the area, using them sparingly for weekends or holidays. Because of this, the community operated loosely under the guidance of a homeowners association, HOA, which handled minor issues like shared maintenance costs and occasional repairs. Sarah rarely interacted with the HOA because her cabin predated most of their rules and regulations. Besides, she didn't live there full-time, so she wasn't particularly invested in their activities. What everyone seemed to overlook, or perhaps simply took for granted, was the fact that Sarah owned the only access road leading to the cabins. Without her permission, no one could reach their properties. At first, this arrangement worked smoothly. Sarah allowed her neighbors free passage through the road without complaint. After all, she believed in being neighborly and saw no reason to cause trouble. The road was wide enough for cars to pass comfortably, and she occasionally lent a hand clearing fallen branches or snow after storms. In return, her neighbors respected her privacy and left her alone to enjoy her peaceful retreat. But things began to change when the HOA underwent a leadership shakeup. A new board took charge, bringing with them stricter enforcement of rules and a more rigid approach to managing the community. Under their watch, notices started appearing on doors, reminding residents about everything from lawn care standards to mailbox colors. While some people appreciated the renewed focus on order, others found the sudden micromanagement suffocating. For Sarah, who valued her independence above all else, these changes felt intrusive. It wasn't long before Sarah received her first official letter from the HOA. Slipped discreetly under her door one chilly morning, the note politely reminded her to repaint her mailbox to match the community-approved color scheme. Sarah chuckled at the absurdity of it. Her mailbox was functional, sturdy, and blended perfectly with the rustic charm of her cabin. Why fix something that wasn't broken? Still, she shrugged it off as a harmless request and decided to ignore it. However, the letters kept coming. Next, they demanded she trim the trees lining her driveway, claiming they obstructed visibility for passing vehicles. Then came another notice about installing reflective markers along the edges of the road for safety purposes. Each request grew increasingly ridiculous, and Sarah couldn't help but feel targeted. She hadn't asked for any of this attention, nor did she see why the HOA suddenly cared so much about her property. But the real trouble began when they took matters into their own hands. One crisp autumn morning, Sarah woke up to find a shiny metal gate blocking the entrance to her road. A sign hung prominently on the gate announcing that access was now restricted to authorized personnel only. Beneath it, a keypad gleamed in the early light, daring anyone to try entering without permission. Sarah stared at it in disbelief. How could they do this? This was her road, part of the land she legally owned. No one had consulted her, let alone sought her approval, before installing the gate. Worse still, the HOA had distributed keycards exclusively to its members, effectively cutting her off from her own property unless she joined the association, a requirement she found both unfair and insulting. Furious and confused, Sarah marched straight to the HOA's office, determined to get answers. The board president, a stern-looking man named Mr. Harper, greeted her with a smug smile. He explained that the gate was installed for security reasons, citing concerns about unauthorized vehicles using the road. When Sarah pointed out that she owned the road outright, Mr. Harper dismissed her claim, insisting that the road had always been considered communal property. His tone was patronizing, as if he expected her to back down quietly. But Sarah wasn't the type to give up easily. She left the meeting fuming, vowing to fight back. Little did she know, this confrontation was only the beginning of a long and grueling battle, one that would test her patience, resilience, and faith in human decency. As she drove home that evening, glancing at the imposing gate blocking her way, Sarah realized something important. This wasn't just about a road anymore. It was about standing up for what was rightfully hers, and sending a message to those who thought they could trample over her rights without consequence. The morning after Sarah discovered the gate blocking her road, she woke up with a heavy heart and a mind buzzing with frustration. The sight of that shiny metal barrier still lingered in her thoughts, mocking her sense of ownership and control over her own property. She had spent years building her cabin into a peaceful retreat, only to have it disrupted by people who seemed determined to impose their will on her. But what bothered her most wasn't just the gate itself. It was the audacity behind it. How could the HOA install something so intrusive without even consulting her? And how could they claim the road belonged to everyone when the legal documents clearly stated otherwise? Determined to get answers, Sarah decided to dig deeper. She began by reviewing the paperwork she'd kept from when she first purchased the land decades ago. The stack of faded documents was tucked away in a dusty filing cabinet in her study, untouched for years. As she sifted through them, memories of those early days came rushing back. The excitement of finding the perfect plot, the long conversations, with lawyers ensuring everything was in order, and finally the satisfaction of signing the deed. It didn't take long for her to find what she was looking for. The original title proving her ownership of not just the cabin, but also the access road. Armed with this evidence, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. Surely, once the HOA saw these documents, they would realize their mistake and remove the gate. After all, facts were facts, and there was no denying the truth written in black and white. With renewed determination, she made copies of the relevant pages and headed back to the HOA office, ready to present her case. When Sarah arrived, she was greeted by Mr. Harper, the same board president who had dismissed her concerns during their previous meeting. This time, however, she came prepared. Calmly and confidently, she laid out the documents on his desk, pointing out the sections that proved her ownership of the road. "This is my property," she said firmly. "You can't just put up a gate without my permission." To her surprise, Mr. Harper barely glanced at the papers. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. "I'm sorry, Ms. Thompson," he replied coolly, "but I'm afraid things aren't as simple as you think. While we respect your claims, the road has been used by the community for years. That makes it communal property in practice, if not in name." Sarah blinked, stunned by his response. "Used by the community?" she echoed. "With my permission? I've never charged anyone or restricted access, but that doesn't mean I gave up my rights." Mr. Harper shrugged, seemingly unfazed. "Be that as it may, the board feels it's in the best interest of the neighborhood to regulate access. Safety is our top priority." "Safety?" Sarah shot back, her voice rising slightly. What exactly are you protecting us from? Deer crossing the road? Falling leaves? Don't give me that nonsense. This is about control, plain and simple. The tension in the room grew palpable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, with a sigh, Mr. Harper stood up and walked around his desk. His tone softened, but there was still an edge to his words. "Look, Sarah," he said, using her first name for the first time. "We're not trying to antagonize you. We understand this situation might feel unfair, but we have to consider the greater good here. If we allow one person to dictate terms, where does it end?" Sarah clenched her fists under the table, biting back a sharp retort. She knew arguing further wouldn't get her anywhere. These people weren't interested in listening. They were too busy justifying their actions. With a curt nod, she gathered her papers and left, feeling angrier than ever. As the days turned into weeks, the tension between Sarah and the HOA continued to escalate. Notices began appearing more frequently on her doorstep, each one demanding compliance with some new rule or regulation. One day it was about trimming the hedges along her driveway. Another, it was a reminder to replace her outdoor light fixtures with approved models. Each letter chipped away at her patience, making her feel like she was being singled out for punishment. But the real breaking point came when the HOA sent a formal warning threatening legal action if Sarah refused to comply with their demands. The letter accused her of violating community guidelines and warned that failure to cooperate could result in fines, or worse, forced removal of the gate at her expense. Sarah couldn't believe what she was reading. Not only were they refusing to acknowledge her ownership of the road, but now they were trying to strong-arm her into submission. Furious and overwhelmed, Sarah decided to seek advice from someone who understood the intricacies of property law. A friend recommended a local attorney named Mark Reynolds, known for his expertise in disputes involving homeowners associations. Reluctantly, Sarah scheduled a meeting with him, hoping he could shed light on her options. Mark listened intently as Sarah recounted her story, occasionally jotting down notes. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "From what you've told me," he said slowly, "it sounds like the HOA is overstepping its bounds. You have clear documentation proving your ownership of the road, which gives you significant leverage. However, resolving this issue won't be easy. Homeowners associations often operate under the assumption that they hold ultimate authority, and challenging them can lead to drawn-out battles." Sarah nodded, bracing herself for the reality of the situation. "I know it won't be simple," she admitted, "but I'm not backing down. They can't just ignore the law and expect to get away with it." Mark smiled faintly, impressed by her resolve. "Good," he said, "because this fight is going to require patience, persistence, and a willingness to stand your ground. But if we play our cards right, we might just come out on top." With Mark's guidance, Sarah began gathering additional evidence to strengthen her case. She collected old photographs of the road before the gate was installed, testimonials from neighbors who remembered her allowing free access for years, and even emails exchanged with previous HOA boards discussing maintenance responsibilities. Every piece of information reinforced her position, painting a clear picture of how the current leadership was misrepresenting the truth. Meanwhile, tensions within the community reached a boiling point. Word spread quickly about Sarah's standoff with the HOA, dividing residents into two camps. Some sympathized with her plight, recognizing the injustice of restricting access to someone's private property. Others sided with the HOA, believing that rules were rules and exceptions couldn't be made for anyone, not even Sarah. Anonymous notes started appearing on Sarah's doorstep, some supportive, others hostile. One neighbor wrote, "We're with you, Sarah, hang in there," while another scrawled, "Stop causing trouble and join the HOA already." The mixed reactions left Sarah feeling isolated yet oddly motivated. She realized that this conflict wasn't just about her anymore. It was about setting a precedent for how communities treated individuals' rights versus collective interests. Despite the growing pressure, Sarah refused to back down. She knew the road ahead would be rocky, but she also knew she had justice on her side. As she sat on her porch one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, she felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. No matter what happened next, she was ready to fight. For her home, for her principles, and for the right to live freely without interference. With her lawyer Mark Reynolds by her side, Sarah took the first bold step toward reclaiming control of her property. The legal process was daunting, but Sarah knew she couldn't let fear or intimidation stop her. Together, they filed a lawsuit against the HOA, accusing them of trespassing on her private land and violating her property rights. It was a move that sent shockwaves through the small mountain community. For years, the HOA had operated with an air of authority, assuming their decisions would go unchallenged. But now Sarah's actions made it clear she wasn't going to back down without a fight. The initial response from the HOA board was predictable, defensive and dismissive. Mr. Harper, the board president, held an emergency meeting with other members to discuss how to handle the situation. They quickly hired their own team of lawyers, determined to counter Sarah's claims in court. Behind closed doors, whispers circulated about whether they had overplayed their hand. Some board members began questioning the wisdom of installing the gate in the first place, while others doubled down, convinced that standing firm was the only way to maintain their authority. Meanwhile, Sarah found herself at the center of a growing storm. As news of the lawsuit spread, opinions among the residents became sharply divided. On one side were those who supported Sarah, believing she had every right to defend her property. Many admired her courage for taking on such a powerful entity. A few even offered to testify on her behalf, sharing stories of how Sarah had always been generous with access to the road, never once charging fees or imposing restrictions. These supporters saw the HOA's actions as heavy-handed and unnecessary. On the other side were neighbors who sided with the HOA, viewing Sarah's resistance as disruptive and selfish. Some argued that her refusal to comply with the rules put the entire community at risk, citing vague concerns about safety and order. Others simply resented the inconvenience caused by the ongoing conflict, blaming Sarah for stirring up trouble. Anonymous notes continued to appear on her doorstep, some filled with venomous words like, "You're ruining everything," and "Why can't you just fall in line?" Despite the hostility, Sarah remained steadfast. She understood that change often came with resistance, and she refused to let negativity sway her resolve. Instead, she focused on building her case, working closely with Mark to gather more evidence. They pored over old records, examined satellite images of the property over the years, and interviewed former HOA members who had served before the current leadership took charge. Each new piece of information strengthened their position, painting a compelling picture of how the HOA had overstepped its boundaries. As the weeks dragged on, tensions in the neighborhood reached a fever pitch. Conversations at the local coffee shop turned into heated debates. Social gatherings grew awkward as people avoided discussing the elephant in the room. Even casual encounters between neighbors became strained, with some refusing to speak to Sarah altogether. For someone who valued peace and solitude, this sudden spotlight felt suffocating. Yet Sarah reminded herself why she was doing this. Not for revenge or attention, but to protect her rights and set an example for fairness. Then, just when it seemed like the battle lines were drawn and the outcome uncertain, a shocking discovery changed everything. During routine research for the case, Mark stumbled upon something extraordinary, a series of internal documents from the HOA's archives. These papers revealed that the board had knowingly misrepresented facts about the road's ownership during previous negotiations with homeowners. In emails and memos, key members admitted that the road technically belonged to Sarah, but chose to downplay this detail to push their agenda forward. Mark immediately shared the findings with Sarah, who could hardly believe what she was reading. The HOA hadn't just acted out of ignorance. They had deliberately misled residents into thinking the road was communal property. Worse still, they had exploited Sarah's generosity, using her willingness to allow free access as leverage to reinforce their false narrative. This revelation confirmed Sarah's worst fears. The HOA wasn't just misguided, it was manipulative. Armed with this explosive evidence, Sarah and Mark decided to take the offensive. They presented the documents to the court, arguing that the HOA's actions amounted to fraud. The judge overseeing the case agreed to review the materials, setting the stage for a dramatic showdown. Word of the discovery leaked to the public, sparking outrage among residents. Those who had previously supported the HOA began to question their loyalty, while Sarah's allies gained confidence, knowing they had justice on their side. Realizing they were losing ground, the HOA scrambled to salvage their reputation. They issued a statement claiming the documents were taken out of context and accused Sarah of twisting the truth to suit her narrative. But their attempts to deflect blame fell flat. Local media picked up the story, shining a spotlight on the controversy. Reporters interviewed both sides, airing grievances and exposing cracks within the HOA's leadership. The tide of public opinion shifted dramatically in Sarah's favor, with many calling for accountability and transparency. Desperate to avoid further embarrassment, the HOA proposed a settlement. Through their lawyers, they offered Sarah financial compensation and unrestricted access to the road if she agreed to drop the lawsuit. They also promised to remove the gate and issue a formal apology, though the terms were vague and non-committal. At first glance, it seemed like a tempting offer, an easy way out after months of stress and uncertainty. But Sarah wasn't interested in taking the bait. She met with Mark to discuss the proposal, her expression firm. "This isn't about money," she said. "It's about holding them accountable for what they've done. If I settle now, they'll walk away thinking they can get away with this kind of behavior again. I won't let that happen." Mark nodded approvingly. He had seen clients buckle under pressure before, but Sarah was different. Her determination inspired him, and he respected her decision to see the case through to the end. "You're doing the right thing," he assured her. Sometimes standing up for principle is more important than any payout. Encouraged by his support, Sarah rejected the settlement offer and prepared for trial. She knew the road ahead would be long and challenging, but she also knew she had the truth on her side. Every sleepless night, every tense conversation with neighbors, every moment of doubt, it all fueled her resolve to keep fighting. This wasn't just about her cabin anymore. It was about sending a message to anyone who thought they could trample over someone else's rights without consequence. As the trial date approached, Sarah returned to her porch, where she often found solace in the beauty of nature. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the valley. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. No matter what happened next, she had already won in one crucial way. She had stayed true to herself. And as she gazed at the winding road leading to her cabin, the road she had fought so hard to protect, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle wasn't over yet, but she was ready to face whatever came next. The day of the trial arrived, and Sarah felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her: nervousness, determination, and even a flicker of excitement. She had spent months preparing for this moment, gathering evidence, consulting with her lawyer, and bracing herself for whatever might come next. The courtroom was a solemn place with its high ceilings, wooden benches, and the faint echo of murmured conversations filling the air. As Sarah took her seat beside Mark Reynolds, she glanced around at the faces in the room. Some were familiar, neighbors who had shown up to witness the proceedings, while others were strangers, reporters eager to cover the story that had captivated the community. The judge presiding over the case was an older woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Her presence commanded respect, and Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of hope as she listened to the opening statements. Mark began by laying out the facts of the case in clear, concise language. He presented the original deed proving Sarah's ownership of the road, along with photographs, testimonies from longtime residents, and the explosive internal documents uncovered during their investigation. Each piece of evidence painted a damning picture of the HOA's actions, showing how they had knowingly misrepresented the truth and violated Sarah's rights. On the other side, the HOA's lawyers tried to downplay the significance of the documents, arguing that the road had been used collectively for years and therefore should be considered communal property. They claimed that installing the gate was a necessary step to ensure safety and order within the community. But their arguments lacked conviction, especially when Mark cross-examined key witnesses from the HOA board. Under pressure, some admitted to knowing about Sarah's ownership of the road but choosing to ignore it because it didn't align with their goals. Others stumbled over their words, contradicting earlier statements and further undermining their credibility. As the trial progressed, it became increasingly clear that the tide was turning in Sarah's favor. The judge listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes or asking pointed questions that exposed weaknesses in the HOA's defense. At one point, she turned to Mr. Harper, the board president, and asked bluntly, "If Ms. Thompson owns the road outright, why did your organization proceed with installing the gate without her consent?" Mr. Harper hesitated, visibly uncomfortable, before offering a vague response about acting in the best interest of the community. The judge raised an eyebrow but said nothing, letting the silence speak volumes. By the time closing arguments rolled around, Sarah could feel the momentum shifting. Mark delivered a powerful speech, emphasizing the importance of respecting private property rights and holding organizations like the HOA accountable for their actions. He reminded the court that this wasn't just about one person's land. It was about setting a precedent for fairness and integrity. When he finished speaking, Sarah felt a lump rise in her throat. For so long she had carried the weight of this battle on her shoulders, and now finally someone was standing up for her in the most meaningful way possible. The verdict came days later, after what felt like an eternity of waiting. Sarah returned to the courtroom, her heart pounding as the judge prepared to announce the decision. The room fell silent, every eye fixed on the bench. Then, with steady authority, the judge delivered her ruling. Sarah was unequivocally the rightful owner of the road, and the HOA had acted unlawfully by installing the gate and restricting her access. Not only was the gate ordered to be removed immediately, but the HOA was also required to issue a formal apology and cover all of Sarah's legal fees. Additionally, the judge mandated that the HOA hold a public meeting to address their misconduct and implement measures to prevent similar incidents in the future. The relief Sarah felt was overwhelming. Tears welled up in her eyes as she hugged Mark, who grinned broadly, clearly proud of the outcome. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed her, eager for a statement. Though she had never sought publicity, Sarah knew this was an opportunity to send a message. Standing tall, she addressed the crowd, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "This wasn't about revenge or personal gain," she said. "It was about standing up for what's right, for fairness, honesty, and respect. I hope this serves as a reminder that no one is above the law, not even those in positions of power." Her words resonated deeply, earning applause from supporters and nods of agreement from others. Back in the neighborhood, reactions varied. Some residents celebrated the verdict, relieved that justice had prevailed. Others remained bitter, accusing Sarah of causing unnecessary drama. But there was no denying the impact of the ruling. The HOA's reputation was tarnished, and several members resigned in disgrace. Those who stayed vowed to rebuild trust, promising greater transparency and accountability moving forward. For Sarah, the victory brought both closure and reflection. While she was glad to have her rights restored, she couldn't ignore the toll the conflict had taken on her relationships with neighbors. Tensions still lingered, and some wounds would take time to heal. Determined to mend fences, Sarah decided to take the initiative. She invited her neighbors to a small gathering at her cabin, a casual evening around a bonfire, complete with homemade snacks and warm drinks. It wasn't about grand gestures or forced apologies. It was about reconnecting on a human level, sharing stories and finding common ground. To her surprise, more people showed up than she expected. Some came out of curiosity, while others genuinely wanted to make amends. As they sat together under the starlit sky, laughter and conversation gradually replaced awkward silences. One neighbor, a retired teacher named Mrs. Bennett, approached Sarah with a heartfelt apology. "I'm sorry if I ever doubted you," she said softly. "You've been through so much, and I admire your strength." Sarah smiled, touched by the gesture. "Thank you," she replied. "I just want us to move forward, to focus on what brings us together instead of what divides us." Over time, these small steps toward reconciliation began to bear fruit. Trust was slowly rebuilt, and the atmosphere in the community shifted. Neighbors started working together again, collaborating on shared projects like planting flower beds along the road or organizing seasonal cleanup days. Even the new HOA leadership made efforts to engage residents in meaningful ways, seeking input rather than imposing rules. While scars from the conflict remained, they served as reminders of lessons learned about the importance of communication, empathy, and mutual respect. Sarah, too, emerged from the ordeal stronger and wiser. She realized that fighting for her rights hadn't just been about protecting her property. It had been about reclaiming her voice and asserting her place in the world. The experience taught her that standing up for oneself wasn't selfish. It was essential. And though she cherished her solitude, she also understood the value of connection, of being part of something larger than herself. On quiet evenings, Sarah often found herself sitting on her porch, gazing at the winding road that had sparked such a life-changing journey. The gate was gone now, replaced by open space and freedom. Birds chirped in the distance, leaves rustled in the breeze, and the scent of pine filled the air. Everything seemed exactly as it should be. Yet Sarah knew that beneath the surface things were different, better perhaps. She had faced adversity head-on and come out stronger on the other side. And as she watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, she felt a deep sense of peace. Her fight had ended, but her story, and the lessons it carried, would live on. The weeks following the court's ruling brought a mix of relief and reflection for Sarah. The victory had been hard-fought, and while it felt satisfying to see justice served, she couldn't shake the lingering sense of division within the community. The trial had exposed cracks in relationships that wouldn't heal overnight. Some neighbors still avoided her gaze during chance encounters at the grocery store or post office. Others whispered behind her back, questioning whether she had gone too far in challenging the HOA. But amidst the tension, there were also glimmers of hope. Moments when people reached out with kind words or gestures, acknowledging the courage it must have taken to stand up against such a powerful entity. Determined to rebuild trust, Sarah threw herself into fostering connections with her neighbors. She knew that mending fences wouldn't happen automatically. It required effort, patience, and vulnerability. Her bonfire gathering had been a good start, but she wanted to do more. So she began hosting smaller, informal get-togethers at her cabin, a potluck dinner one weekend, a game night the next. Slowly but surely, these events became opportunities for residents to reconnect on a personal level, away from the shadow of conflict. At first, attendance was sparse. Only a handful of neighbors showed up, mostly those who had already supported Sarah during the lawsuit. But as word spread about how welcoming and genuine these gatherings were, more people started coming. One evening, Sarah noticed Mr. Peterson, an older gentleman who had once been vocal about siding with the HOA, sitting quietly in a corner. He didn't say much, but his presence alone spoke volumes. After everyone left, Sarah approached him hesitantly, unsure of what to expect. "I wasn't sure if I'd be welcome here," Mr. Peterson admitted, his voice tinged with regret. "But your invitation meant a lot." Sarah smiled warmly. "Everyone is welcome here," she replied. "We all live in this community together, and I think we can agree that the past year hasn't been easy for anyone. Let's focus on moving forward." Mr. Peterson nodded, visibly moved. From that moment on, he became one of Sarah's most ardent supporters, often defending her to others who still harbored resentment. His change of heart inspired others to reconsider their own biases, creating a ripple effect of reconciliation throughout the neighborhood. As trust slowly rebuilt, Sarah noticed subtle shifts in the community dynamic. Conversations grew less guarded, laughter returned to shared spaces, and cooperation replaced suspicion. Neighbors began working together on projects that benefited everyone, clearing fallen branches after storms, planting wildflowers along the roadside, and organizing weekend hikes through the surrounding woods. Even the new HOA leadership seemed eager to prove they had turned over a new leaf, holding regular meetings where residents could voice their concerns without fear of judgment. Still, Sarah understood that healing wasn't linear. There were days, when old wounds resurfaced, reminders of the pain caused by the dispute. Anonymous notes occasionally appeared on her doorstep, though they were fewer and farther between now. Instead of anger, however, Sarah chose to respond with compassion. She left handwritten replies tucked under the doors of those who sent them, expressing gratitude for their honesty and inviting them to talk openly if they ever felt comfortable doing so. While not everyone accepted her olive branch, some did, and those conversations often led to breakthroughs in understanding. One particularly memorable exchange happened with a young couple, the Millers, who had recently moved into the area. They had arrived just as the conflict was reaching its peak and had initially sided with the HOA, believing Sarah's resistance disrupted the harmony of the neighborhood. When Sarah invited them over for coffee one afternoon, they hesitated, but eventually agreed. Over steaming cups of tea and homemade cookies, they opened up about their fears that standing up to authority might create chaos or make life uncomfortable for everyone involved. Sarah listened patiently, nodding as they spoke. "I understand why you'd feel that way," she said gently. "But sometimes, staying silent can cause more harm than speaking up. This fight wasn't about causing trouble. It was about protecting something important. And I hope it shows that fairness matters, even when it's hard." Her words struck a chord with the Millers, who left her cabin with a newfound respect for her perspective. From then on, they became active participants in rebuilding the community, helping organize events and encouraging others to embrace collaboration over conflict. Despite the progress, Sarah remained mindful of the scars left behind. She knew that while forgiveness could heal many wounds, some memories would always linger. Rather than trying to erase them, she chose to honor them by using her experience as a teaching moment. She started sharing her story at local forums and community workshops, speaking candidly about the importance of standing up for one's rights while also emphasizing the value of dialogue and compromise. Her talks resonated deeply with audiences, inspiring others to approach disputes with empathy and integrity. Back at her cabin, Sarah found joy in rediscovering the simple pleasures that had drawn her to the mountains in the first place. She spent mornings tending to her garden, afternoons hiking through the woods, and evenings watching the sunset from her porch. Life felt lighter now, unburdened by the weight of constant tension. Yet, she carried with her the lessons learned from the battle, a deeper appreciation for resilience, a stronger belief in the power of fairness, and a renewed commitment to fostering connection. On a crisp autumn evening, Sarah hosted one final gathering before winter settled in. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and wood smoke as neighbors gathered around a crackling fire. Laughter echoed through the trees, mingling with the sound of crickets chirping in the distance. Someone brought out a guitar, and soon, impromptu songs filled the night. It was a scene straight out of Sarah's dreams, a reminder of the beauty that came from unity and shared purpose. As she stood by the fire, gazing at the faces illuminated by its warm glow, Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude. This was her home, not just the cabin or the land, but the people who inhabited it alongside her. Together they had weathered a storm and emerged stronger on the other side. The road leading to her property no longer symbolized conflict. Instead, it represented freedom, resilience, and the enduring power of community. And as the stars twinkled above, casting their light over the peaceful valley, Sarah knew she had found exactly what she had been searching for all along. A place where she belonged, flaws and all.